Hi, this is Political News in 5, and today is February 26th, 2023. This is a bonus edition because it's end of the month and it's also the day after Nigeria's presidential elections. We're happy that it held and it was relatively peaceful. Now, I'm just going to divide what I'm going to say today into 5 short parts. The first is the promise, what from yesterday was promising. The second are the fears and the worries from what, again, we experienced yesterday. The third are the questions, 1 or 2. Fourth would be the gist, what's going on. And the last will be the hope. Now, on the promise, what I found promising is just the third force, the idea of the third force. I think it's finally here. The energy around obedience and their candidate was still on display yesterday, at least on social media and offline. People protecting their vote, demanding, wanting to vote, the chanting, the recording, the sharing. Absolutely fantastic, and it seems organic, and we hope it stays that way. There's obviously a connection between NSAS at the end of October 2020 and the energy that we're seeing here, and regardless of what the results are, we hope that energy will stay. What's also promising is that, again, tied to that is just the people as structure. The other parties, 2 main parties, have often derided obedience and other parties for not having structures, their response has been the people are the structures, and they showed that again yesterday with all the support that they put to make sure that they voted, what they endured in order to be able to cast their votes yesterday was just absolutely inspiring. Especially the next thing, what I found very promising is just the role that women were playing around the country on election day. Whether it was the lady who was stabbed in the eye, blood dripping from her face, who still insisted on coming back to cast her vote, Chema Botha, just sharing what was happening in her polling unit. Many of the videos that we saw yesterday were women reporting what's going on in their polling units, material not coming on time, people still on the lines at 8 o'clock. We saw what happened to Natasha Akpoti in Kogi, allegedly at the hands of the governor who who sent people to dig up roads to her area, her community, so that it would be impossible for INEC material to come in. Maybe they didn't even need to bother with that, considering how late INEC was around the country. But anyway, kudos to the women for standing up and being there side by side and fighting for what they believe in. And that brings me to the worry. The logistics. INEC just never seems to get it right, and one wants to say, on one hand, well done to INEC for those who obviously have put in a lot of sleepless nights to get us to where we were. It's not an easy logistical operation to be able to do this type of thing. But again, for people who haven't been able to vote, who found it difficult to vote, whose experiences were quite hard, you'd like to think, are there any lessons being learned? What exactly is the problem? Again, we left yesterday with that sense that there's some sort of connivance that involves INEC officials, whether they're ad hoc, whether they're full-time staff. Things like getting to a polling unit late, fine, those logistical issues, we see them. But getting there and saying you don't have ink pads, getting there and saying you don't have the BVAS codes or passwords, getting there or saying you left the result sheets, those things are unforgivable and should be punished. Another thing that's worrying is this thing that started with Buhari showing his ballot paper and how he voted. Absolutely, apart from it being illegal and against the Electoral Act, it's cowardly in Buhari's case. And then Ortom did it and Ojikalu did it. There's a link between showing your ballot paper and vote trading. This is something that civil society and development sector spend a lot of time trying to deal with. I think there's a diversion, but showing your ballot paper is not right, and you shouldn't have the president of the country doing it. And let's hope that nobody else will pick up on that. And those are the things that we're worried. I'm also worried that although we're pleased that elections were not postponed, maybe they should have been if INEC wasn't ready. What is worth doing well. But hey, we also have many examples of, for example, 2019, where we postponed the elections by a week and still things seemed quite particularly shambolic. Kano, the gist is that that's going to Kwankwaso. He's doing really very well. Nobody's really sure what's happening in other Kardashian sister states like Kaduna, Katsina, and Kebbi. It's kind of quiet in the north. Beginning to get a sense of what's happening in places like Borno, Yobe, Adamawa. But the northwest, aside Kano, it's a bit hard to tell right now what's going on there. Who's losing, who's winning? It sounds like Autumn lost, or maybe lost only his polling unit, but he was pushing for Labour for president. Maybe he forgot to campaign for himself as an APC senatorial candidate, but the stories are that he lost. Stories that Desmond Elliott lost. Stories also that the current Senate President Ahmed Lawan, who had been battling for the ticket with Machina, and the Supreme Court only gave him the ticket a few days to the election, might also have lost. Amen to that, and let's hope the courts stay out of it this time. There's rumors that Banky W might also lose his seat to the Labour candidate, who seems to be doing well, even though most people don't know who he is. He's a beneficiary of the energy around Peter Obi. And of course, what's the gist is that, Rivers State, Wike did his best to try and deliver for APC and to depress the votes for Obi and Atiku. Unfortunately, it's not clear how that's going to go. For those who admire Wike, I really don't know. When we say somebody's a strong man in Nigeria, when we say somebody's held down a state, just remember that that's done at the compromise of all institutions, all checks and balances, and probably using violence and intimidation as a weapon, which is, for me, it's anyway. And then the questions. For me, one key question from yesterday is just how long it took to upload the results, particularly the presidential election results. As of this morning, only about 25,000, about 14% of the results had been uploaded. And why did it take so long? Actually, some people had finished counting by 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock around the country. Some polling units were very small, and then others were just extremely large. That's also a question. How did INEC decide to do that, where you have a polling unit with 4,000, 2,000 people, and you have another one with 200 people, and sometimes they're just literally minutes away from each other? So a bit messy. Let's hope that for the gubernatorial elections, things will be a lot different. And then finally, the hope. The hope is that one day election as events, election as suffering will end in Nigeria. People spent way too much time trying to cast their votes yesterday, and some people, got beat up. Some people had to wait until the results were counted. Some people had to provide data, had to provide generators and things. Why would we want to do this twice? And that's another reason why the gubernatorial elections and the State House of Assembly elections in another 2 weeks, you can expect definitely always a lower voter turnout. People are exhausted. We really, really, honestly, the campaign for any reforms in elections in Nigeria need to include a merger of the two elections. This charade, this expensive charade of splitting the elections needs to end. There's a rigging thing in there where the governors deliver the president and then everybody turns a blind eye. Enough of that. All elections should hold on one day. It would be much cheaper. And then finally, my last hope is that regardless of what the results reveal, many Nigerians know that we've won. We won a lot of things. We've won because we've shown the two main parties that there's enough Nigerians who, are exhausted with the status quo and want things to be reformed. We want reforms. We want meaningful reforms, not just faces changing. We want reforms in terms of governance, laws, responsibility, accountability. So that's the hope going forward. And the other hope is that, again, regardless of the results, maybe hopefully for the results, people have full confidence that in the power of their votes, and that their votes are reflected in the end results. And that's it on Political News in 5. Have a great week ahead. Fingers crossed for the results when they're finally announced, that Nigeria will hold together, that there will be no violence, there will be no not too much damage done to our already fragile social cohesion and unity in the country. We've already gone through a lot over the last 7.5 years. Let's hold it together and just keep moving on. As they say, we move. That's it on Political News in 5. Have a great week ahead, and I'll be back next week with more analysis.